You know, when you hear traumatic spinal cord injury, your mind probably jumps straight to the immediate stuff, right? The impact on a person's ability to move. But what if that's just chapter one? We're going to dive into this because a huge new study is telling us that the initial injury, well, it's more like the first shockwave of something that affects the entire body for life. So yeah, that's the big question we're tackling. After the accident, after the rehab, what happens down the road? Years, even decades later. For a long, long time, we just didn't have a clear picture, especially for folks who were, totally healthy before it happened. But now, we've got some pretty incredible and honestly startling answers. All right, so let's get into how they found these answers. Researchers launched this massive study to really dig into those long-term effects, the ones that stretch way beyond the spine. So we all kind of get what a traumatic spinal cord injury, a TSCI, is, right? It's a sudden, life-changing event. But here's the thing. This new research is basically telling us to rethink that whole idea. It's pushing us to see a TSCI not just as a one-and-done injury, but as the beginning of a lifelong chronic condition. And this isn't some small-scale study either. We're talking about researchers digging through almost 30 years of data from two of the biggest hospital systems in the U.S. Their goal was simple: create the clearest, most detailed picture we've ever had of what life is really like after one of these injuries. Now, this is where it gets really clever. They took almost 2,800 patients who'd had a TSCI, and then they found over 8,200 people who hadn't, and matched them up perfectly. Same age, same sex, same race. Why does that matter? Because it means you can make a super clean, direct comparison. It lets you zero in on what's happening because of the injury and nothing else. And what they found, wow, it's this massive ripple effect. The injury isn't just contained to the spine. It spreads out, setting off this chain reaction of health issues all over the body. The leading theory? That initial trauma kicks off this low-grade chronic inflammation that just never stops. It also messes with the nervous system's ability to control basic things like blood pressure and metabolism. It basically throws the whole system out of whack for years. Okay. Let's get into the actual numbers because they're pretty shocking. For starters, patients with a spinal cord injury were 2.5 times more likely to have a major stroke. That right there is a huge clue that this is a cardiovascular issue, messing with blood flow all the way up to the brain. And the link between the spine and the brain doesn't stop there. Get this, the risk of dementia was 3 times higher. Just think about that for a second. An injury in your back dramatically increases the risk of a disease inside your skull. That's a wild, eye-opening connection. Of course, it's not just the physical side of things. The mental health impact is huge, too. The risk for depression shot up by 2.7 times. It's just more proof that the injury and everything that comes after it, physiologically, hits the mind just as hard as it hits the body. And the list just keeps going. The big takeaway here is that this is a full-body, multi-system issue. We're talking higher risks for things like high blood pressure and heart disease, but also a nearly 3 times higher risk of seizures. And, this is a big one, over 3 times the risk of substance misuse. When you put it all together, the data is just screaming. This creates widespread, long-term disease. But here's another really crucial piece of the puzzle. It's not just that these diseases pop up, it's when. For the uninjured group, sure, chronic conditions showed up slowly over time as people got older, pretty much what you'd expect. But for the group with a spinal cord injury, it's like their bodies were on fast forward. These serious conditions started appearing way, way earlier in life. Now you might be thinking, okay, this is probably something that mostly affects older patients, right? Well, that's what makes this next part so important. The study found that this isn't an old person problem. The risk is there for everyone, no matter their age. Yeah, let me just say that again to make sure it sinks in. A young person, someone who was perfectly healthy before their accident, faces these exact same long-term risks. Your age doesn't protect you at all. And when you look specifically at younger adults, say 18 to 45, the numbers are staggering. We're talking about people in the prime of their life who now have a nearly 3 times higher risk of a stroke. And check out the mental health side. A 5-fold increase in the risk of bipolar disorder and an over 5-fold increase in opioid misuse. I mean, those numbers are just off the charts for a young group. And here's another fascinating detail they found. It didn't really matter where on the spine the injury happened. Whether it was up high in the neck or further down the back, these long-term body-wide risks were pretty much the same, consistently high across the board.
So, what do we do with all this information? What does it all mean? It means we have to fundamentally change how we think about care after a spinal cord injury. This isn't just academic. The stakes are literally life and death.
And this is probably the most sobering finding in the whole study. When these other chronic conditions develop, it's not just about making life harder. It's directly tied to a significantly higher risk of mortality. We already knew that patients with these injuries had lower survival rates, but now we have a much clearer idea of why. It's these follow-up diseases. Let's look at the connections that are the most deadly. Developing seizures after the injury, that was linked to a 6.4 times higher chance of mortality. Dementia, almost 5 times higher. Substance misuse, 4 times higher. It just hammers home the point. Preventing and managing these conditions isn't just a good idea, it's absolutely critical for survival. There's a quote from the study that just perfectly sums up this entire shift in thinking. The researchers say that a spinal cord injury shouldn't be seen as just an acute event, but as a chronic condition that requires long-term surveillance and management. That's it, right there. It's not a single moment in time you recover from, it's the start of a lifelong health journey. So, what does that mean in the real world? It means the old way of doing things, just waiting for complications to show up and then treating them. It's just not good enough. This research is a call to action for a totally proactive approach. We're talking regular screenings for heart problems, brain health, mental health, all of it. And it means having a whole team of specialists working together with the patient for their entire life. And that leaves us with this huge, critical question for the entire healthcare system, really. Now that we know the body and mind are vulnerable for decades after that initial injury, how do we actually build a new system of care, one that truly supports the whole person for their whole life?